Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here. Today we're going to review some Wilderness era stuff. We're going to be talking about the Flash animation feature Death Comes to Time, which was made, which was released in 2001 and 2002, mostly in 2002. So toward the end of the Wilderness era, and it's one of those Flash animations that we got similar to Shada, Real Time, and Scream of the Shulka. And it has the 7th Doctor, of course, voiced by Sylvester McCoy. It also has Ace with her shorter hair, like I actually think Sophie had for a little bit, like during the 90s in this period, reprising her role as Ace. And then it also has, I think that John Coleshaw guy who's really good with the voices, voicing several characters in it. Where to start with this one? It's really hard to know where to start with this one. This one is different. I mean, I think Wilderness era Doctor Who, I have to catch myself because I keep wanting to say 90s era Doctor Who, but Wilderness era Doctor Who, I think some people who are Doctor Who fans, who have been Doctor Who fans for a long time, would probably agree some of the most original and keen ideas really came about in the 90s, maybe more so than what's come since. And in the Wilderness era as a whole. Because there are a lot of neat ideas that get knocked about during this era between the novels and the audios and then the Flash animations like these. Death Comes to Time, Death Comes to Time is different. It has a different feel to it. It feels like it takes place in a parallel universe that runs a bit different. Well, one, the ending of Death Comes to Time contradicts the TV movie. It really does. Things that happen in the TV movie, what happens here in Death Comes to Time, they don't go together at all. But it definitely has a parallel universe feel to it. The Time Lords themselves, just as a species, the way they act, their presence in the universe, their reason for being in the universe, their backstory almost is vastly different than what we see in modern and even classic Doctor Who. Because this takes more a Highlander approach with them where there's not many of them left, like the Immortals and Highlander toward the end. There's just not many of them left. And that their kind of, their time watching over the universe is past, kind of like the Shadows and the Vorlons. Their time is past, it's time to move on. The Shadows and the Vorlons, of course, being a Babylon 5 reference. Excuse me. And it's they also seem to have powers. Like, Time Lords do have unique powers. We've seen the Doctor use interesting abilities he can do from time to time, but they seem to have vast powers, like interesting powers. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. That doesn't quite fit with what we think of with the Time Lords. And the fact that most of the Time Lords in this story are more benign and mentors and less corrupted pricks like they are, especially in the modern show. But sometimes in the classic show, they have a more benevolence to them, a more noble way they carry themselves, a more nobility to them, which is interesting. It has one Time Lord who is voiced by Stephen Fry, actually, in a much better role than he got in Spyfall, where he plays a character named the Minister, which is a really cool character. I like the way he's drawn. I like the way he acts. I really enjoyed the character. The animation looks pretty good. Similar again to Shada, the 8th Doctor version of Shada, I should say, with Paul McGann in the role from just a couple years later. It's kind of a Flash animation style, but it looks fine. It gets the job done. I enjoyed it. I didn't have any issues with it. I just think it's neat. I'm having to mentally remind myself, this is 2001. You're still 4 years off from the modern series. No one even knows there's going to be a modern series yet. And we're 5 years removed from the TV movie, which did not start a modern series like a lot of people hoped it would, including the people making it. And so Doctor Who is in this kind of limbo, dead state. So to get new Doctor Who that you could watch, online. These look like these were done like as webcast episodes. Was probably new and unique. Hey, I'm getting new Doctor Who I can watch. So I'm sure it was quite exciting for Doctor Who fans. You did have Sylvester McCoy voicing the 7th Doctor. A lot of people might have been like, why not get Paul McGann with the 8th Doctor? But they have Sylvester McCoy. He's great in it. He's putting in a good performance. And there's even parts where, you know, his more chess master nature fits the story better. But then you see parts where he's on the back foot, where things are happening. Like, you think he's managed to predict events like he does a lot, and you find out he doesn't. And he's on the back foot a bit. Seeing him kind of panicked and not knowing what to do is quite fascinating, because you don't see that with his Doctor a lot. So that's quite interesting to watch. I like his companion, who has a really weird name, like Antiphony. I can't remember his name. It's really weird. He's an interesting, unique companion, too, because you get the impression there's something up with him. He doesn't seem like a normal person. The way he talks, the way he moves, the things he can do. There's something off about him, which does get explored later in the story, but it's something I caught on to really quick. There's just something off about him. But he seemed like an interesting companion, and it's not often you see male companions, especially after early Doctor Who. So it's kind of nice to see that. Ace is interesting because she's not with the Doctor here. She's all kind of doing her own thing, where she meets this other person who is also a Time Lord. It reveals that pretty early, so that's not really spoiler territory. And they have very nice philosophical, almost mentor-teacher conversations, kind of like her and the Doctor did, but more philosophical and stuff. Like, you can tell he's training her for something. It's really well done. The scene when he first rescues her from a ship is really well done. I kind of like the dynamic between them. At first, I thought it was unnecessary. I was like, okay, this stuff with Ace doesn't need to be here. You could cut that out. It'd be the same. But as the story progresses, it's 5 episodes. It is 5 episodes, although I think those episodes were split into smaller episodes originally. I think there were little webcast episodes that were originally even smaller, but if you group them together, it groups up to about 5 episodes. Her story becomes more important and more prevalent to the overall narrative later. And Sophie's doing a great job with her. The guy voicing the Time Lord who's mentoring her, I really like him a lot. The villain of the story, like, he can kind of seem two-dimensional, but he definitely comes across as the tyrant type you don't want to screw with. The voice actor voicing him does really good work. Let me be clear, really good work. But he is a little two-dimensional, a little single-mindedness perhaps, but he's a good character. He's an interesting character. Like, the fact he knows what a Time Lord is really early. Like, I think the cliffhanger for episode 1 was like, even Time Lords can die. I was like, oh, he knows about Time Lords. Interesting. And everything you find out about him as the story progresses is pretty neat. Even if the ending of the story feels a little rushed, a little Deus Machina, a little too easy. I can't stop yawning. I cannot stop yawning today. I remember really liking episode 2 a lot. A lot of the stories kind of blend together, especially later on. But episode 2 I really like because there's a vampire running around, and that's cool. And it doesn't really hide that fact, so again, I'm not really spoiling anything. But he's at, like, the Doctor's at, like, this kind of university era, or university place. My mind's going blank. I'm very tired today, apparently. And someone had been murdered. The Doctor was there to investigate with his companion. And there's a vampire running around. And it's a really interesting episode. I actually really liked that one a lot. There's a couple things there I saw coming that, like, when it revealed one thing, I was like, I already picked up on that. I already figured because of this. Like, one thing I picked up on that happened, although to be honest, it doesn't really hide that fact. I think it's something that's pretty easy to kind of pick up on, to be honest. But I thought episode 2 was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. I enjoy it. I'm trying not to get into spoilers, so I'm being really careful. I liked it. It's very different. It's very different. It's creative. It's interesting to see Doctor Who breaking away from its formula. I guess because of the time it came out, they don't feel like they have to reset anything by the end of it, because it's not an episode in the middle of the show. You know, well, everything has to be okay so we can get to the next episode. This is where, okay, there may never be Doctor Who again. Let's have fun with it. We can do what we want. Which is really neat when you take those chains off and you really have the kind of freedom to just do anything. You know, you can't really get crazy with it in a regular show, because especially with older television, that was episodic television, everything had to be reset for the next week. But here, they really let their imagination run wild. I like the voice actors. I like the cast. It's an interesting story. Again, feels more like it takes place in a parallel universe because it does have a very different feel to it, a very different flavor of Doctor Who, but still with an interesting story. I enjoyed it. So I guess that's all I'll say about the story without getting into spoilers. Do I recommend watching it? Sure, it's a nice piece of Doctor Who. It's an interesting video. It's not one I think I'll go back to, possibly ever, but definitely not for a while. It didn't like wow me, but it was interesting and it made me think, and I enjoyed that. So to sum up one last thing about Doctor Who Death Comes to Time is that it's an interesting little bit of Doctor Who that came out at a time when everyone was scrambling to get any new Doctor Who they could get. Well, at least Doctor Who fans. It's interesting. It's interesting, especially, it would have been interesting to watch it when it came out in 2002. But it's an interesting piece of Doctor Who history. It's a nice alternative take on Doctor Who lore. And I definitely think Doctor Who fans should see it. I don't know if it's something I'll go back to, but it's interesting. It's very interesting. And how it goes off in a very different direction than Doctor Who traditionally does. And that was the chair doing something weird. That's fun. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth checking out. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button. I also have a Patreon if you want to support me on that. There's a link to that down in the description below. I want to give a shout out to some of my top tier patrons, Finn Perkins, Colin Coney, and Stephen Crane. I appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. I have a P.O. box if there's anything you'd like to send me to look at and review. A link to my wish list is down there as well. And I also have YouTube memberships available. Most importantly, thank you for watching.